Okay, Mahiuddin, I want to give you a chance to.
Thank you. I want to bring the issue about here back home, the United States. We know how important a role the United States plays in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And one of the problem areas in this is that the Arab countries have not been able to exert any pressure on the United States so that the United States policies are more in sync with the United States goals of establishing democracy and freedom and liberty. So my question is that, or my hope is that if these movements succeed, that will improve the Arab countries' position so that they can more positively influence the United States. So I'd like the panelists to comment about how these events might influence the role of the United States in the Middle East.
Parvane is going to do that.
Maybe this is not directly, my answer is not directly related, but I would like to just give an example. At moments like this, it is very crucial to how to support people. It's not just supporting people, but how to support people of the country in which revolution happens. Sometimes, I mean, scaring people of what may happen if revolution happens, well, it is not supporting it. And sometimes if you defend them against what the most probable threat is, I would like to give an example. Like in Iran, when in 1979 the revolution happened, it was during the Cold War, right? And what was USA mostly scared of? It was not Islamists. It was communism from, the influence of communism from Russia, which was in the north of Iran. And somehow indirectly it was one of the reasons why the leftist parties were the first parties who were crashed down by Islamists. So what happened was that what was scared by the West during World War was kind of imposed on a wrong decision in the country where the revolution had happened. And yes, communism could not succeed there, but what could succeed? Another thing which maybe, I'm not sure, maybe could not be predicted. You know what I mean? So if we are considering too much of this Israel and Arab conflicts or Islamist threat, maybe we should keep our eyes very much open on what are the other options, and are the other options good enough, or they are replacing another kind of threat.
Thank you. Very quick question regarding why you guys haven't touched on the Gulf countries. So what does this really mean to all of them, particularly Saudi Arabia? Yeah. And the second question is, I think it's kind of like a natural question that comes out of all of this is, would this, by any chance, force the U.S. and the West in particular to change their attitude towards these oppressed people? Would that make them realize that maybe a better policy towards these countries will be more beneficial to both in the long run?
Great.
Thanks.
But
I'm going to take in just a little different direction maybe. One thing you have to keep in mind, what is happening, the level of unemployment and the level of corruption is much higher. Not that it doesn't exist in the Gulf, but it's much higher in areas in the Levant and North Africa than it has been in the Gulf countries. And the type of revenue that the Gulf countries have been able to give back to their societies, given that they are rentier states, has given them this opportunity, which you don't find in Egypt, you don't find in Syria, you don't find in North Africa. So I think this is giving this relationship between the people in in the Gulf and their government somewhat different than what you see in the Levant. So will it impact? It's going to really depend. I mean, you don't find organizations, sorry? Yeah, maybe in Bahrain. I mean, Bahrain is a big, because it's been going on for a while, and you have this difference between the government that is 20% of the population fully, and then you've got the population that is 80% Shiite versus 20% Sunni that are ruling. So in those kind of places, you may see kind of movements, but it's less likely you're going to see it in a place like Kuwait or a place like Saudi Arabia, because the dynamics, we should not forget the dynamics that's going on. And this is not new. I mean, the Arab Report in 2009 indicated that by 2020, the number of youth is going to be huge in the Middle East, and that in order to fulfill the level for employment, the Middle East, the Arab countries are going to need to build 25 to 50 million new jobs. And that's going to be really the problem, is how do we get economically the status? Because, okay, we give them, the dictatorships is over. But that's only begun. I mean, for any the political scientists would know that this is the most dangerous time afterwards, is the most dangerous time because of what may be happening internally.
I have a loud voice.
All right, loud voice.
So I am watching the situation as from the perspective of a French revolutionary historian, and so the question from the beginning has been the Egyptian army, because you can't make a revolution without the army siding with the people. And so I was intrigued by the remarks a moment ago about split in the army, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. I'm not clear how many professional soldiers there are in relationship to members of the citizen army that was alluded to earlier. So if you could discuss the culture of the army in Egypt, I would appreciate it.
Can we just talk about the, let me give a few statistics that I've learned recently. I think the size of the Egyptian army, which is seen as most popular, that is the split institution that we've been talking about, is about 450,000. But the more regime-loyal police and secret police are about 350,000 in number, and then there are about 25,000 kind of presidential guard special units. So you're talking, and the latter two of those groups are very loyal to the regime. The really interesting and kind of mysterious, as we heard in these earlier comments, military, popular conscript-based military with different levels of officer corps is really very interesting. It seems to me quite clear that at the level of conscripts, at the level of junior officers, these are people who do not want to shoot at their fellow countrymen. The upper echelons, of course, are going to be more loyal to the regime. And don't forget that the army, further complicating the split picture, is the place where that $1.5 billion of American aid goes directly. So it really is the most fractured, impacted, stressed, discrete unit in this whole social field, it seems to me, and that's why there is this sense of we don't know which way it will go. It could provide the alternatives to a Mubarak and secret police-based government, because of course Ahmed Suleiman is the head of the secret police, his new vice president, so that's not going to be much of a change. I don't think that's going to satisfy the Egyptian people. They've puzzled people by their frustrating neutrality and inability or unwillingness to prevent the violence of the last 2 days. Everyone is watching the military, and I think that that scrutiny is well justified, because for better or for worse, it might be the way that the military falls that determines this outcome, upon which so many other questions that we've discussed tonight rest. So anyone else want to? Adil, did you want to?
No, I concur with you, Layla. I think this is really true. And if the army is really siding with Mubarak all the way, this revolution could have been crushed. But apparently the junior ranks in the army, because the draft is compulsory in Egypt, so most of these soldiers and army officers are from the middle classes there is now, in the past, in order to get into the College of War, they call it, or the Academy of War, you have to be from a very rich family, aristocratic family, but now this is no longer the case. So most of these army officers, the younger army officers, are from among the people that who are doing the uprising now. There could be a brother or a nephew or something like that. So that's why they, maybe they have orders to do something, but definitely that's why I'm saying it is very confusing what they are doing right now, because all the generals and high-ranking officers are siding with Mubarak. They are on his cabinet, but these younger officers are not. And the person in charge, I forgot now his name, of the field on the ground, he said specifically that he understands, but he said we. So that's in a collective manner, that they understand and appreciate the demands of the people, and they approve them, and they are going to protect them. They will not fight against them. So this is different, of course, from the attitude of the high-ranking officers. So I'm not sure, as I said before, why this kind of a split and how it's going to, what is going to lead to. Yeah, in my view, I think eventually the army itself, the high-ranking officers, will ask Mubarak to step down.
You know what? I hate to do this, but I think we must wrap this up on that note of ambiguity. Thank you all so much for coming. And thanks to our panelists. And if you're interested in continuing with all these impromptu activities,